The Alias podcast.
And we are go. How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the Alias podcast. I know it has been a long time. Maybe not too long, but we're looking at about a month and a half since last episode I recorded. Just been caught up with school. A lot of busy stuff going on. Midterms happened, and then I was trying to, I did get to play and watch a lot of things and listen to a lot of things. And every time I wanted to make an episode about a certain thing, either I felt like it wasn't enough for one whole episode, or maybe, I was just really busy at the time. But we're back. We're going to cover a lot of things. This episode is going to be primarily focused on the video games I played over the past month and a half. And yeah, it's been a while, so let's kind of recap how we rock with this. I'm going to talk about whatever the game is, give you guys non-spoilers, and then after that, maybe we'll go ahead and dive into spoiler territory in terms of certain releases. Some might not get a spoilers section, some might. Depends on how important the story is to the subject matter at hand. But yeah, let's get right into it then. So starting off with the first thing, and I think it's good to probably go in chronological order. We're going to actually start out with the new Call of Duty Modern Warfare. Not Call of Duty Modern Warfare 4 or Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, just Call of Duty Modern Warfare or Modern Warfare 2019, however you want to go with it. Kind of a confusing name, but here we are. As some previous episodes, you might be able to tell, I was pretty excited for this release. I haven't been excited with a Call of Duty release in a really long time, but this one I was optimistic about. They're taking a more gritty route. From the beta that I played and the alpha, the gunplay was fantastic, I thought. And I said, you know what? If they carry this over, we could be getting the best COD we've gotten in, well over 5 years. But let's break it down. There's the story mode, obviously the campaign. There's the Spec Ops mode, and then there's the multiplayer mode. So I think we'll go ahead and break these all down in a non-spoiler fashion. Obviously, multiplayer and Spec Ops isn't very spoiler heavy. And then maybe I might talk about some story details at the very end after I've talked about all those things. So going into the story, this is supposed to be a total reboot. Might be using some of the same characters, same scenarios as called the original Modern Warfare, but we're starting fresh. We have new characters, as well as some old ones like Captain Price and like Sergeant Griggs. But we know how what we're getting with these Call of Duty stories. It's a military story where we could have some crazy action set pieces, some intense gunplay, and you get that for about 4 to 5 hours, and you're good to go. However, the thing that with this game that I really came to appreciate was the best parts of the game were actually the smaller, more intense moments. There's been a lot of coverage over a mission early on in the game called Clear House or Clean House, where we have to go through a really small London house, walk through it. It's only about 5 to 6 minutes long, but it's a very intense mission where you're walking through this house slowly, night vision goggles on, and anyone could be a target, anyone could be a civilian. You don't really know. That's kind of a theme that they've been trying to carry with the story and the coverage of this game is, the lines are murkier. You don't know who's maybe an ally or a foe, and part of that has to be figured out sometimes in gameplay situations. But I feel like those are used sparingly. You don't really come across that many situations where that has to occur. Those night vision missions do occur, don't get me wrong, but there's only two of them that are like that out of the 14 or so missions. And with outside of that, the actual situations where you might have to figure out if someone's a civilian or an enemy don't come up much in the story. I thought the story was interesting though. The characters, they're all well acted. The performances were great. And I think there's some confusion that I had when I was playing the game with the story, exactly who am I fighting, what's going on. But I think some of that is very much intentional. You're supposed to be confused about, what you're fighting for and what's going on. But I thought the story mode in the end was a great thrill ride. The situations it put you in were interesting, even though some of them were done before in COD. And in my opinion, I thought the story mode was actually the highlight of this package. I thought the story mode was my favorite part of the game. From there, let's talk about Spec Ops, because I think that's kind of a downer, in my opinion. Spec Ops was a huge dud, and I'm so disappointed to report that, because, you know, for the past however many years, every time there's been a co-op mode in Call of Duty, it's been zombies. I feel like the heyday of zombies in Call of Duty has kind of gone by. It was really fun back in the day, but it's been extremely stagnant, and if anything, it's been going backwards with how complex it's started to get. But, they're bringing back Spec Ops, and we haven't had a Spec Ops mode since 2011's Modern Warfare 3, and, we're going to get survival. Obviously, I was on PlayStation, so that's how I was able to play that. But, man, it was just really, really disappointing. In the previous games, when you had Spec Ops, there was 20 to 30 missions. I don't remember exactly. Each of them had 3-star ranking. They're nice bite-sized adventures that you can play and replay, and they're fun. And you could set the difficulty, if I remember correctly, or some of them it just depended on how fast you could run through something. And those were a blast, and there were 2 players. This time around, you have the classic Spec Ops, and when I originally played the game, there was only one. I know they've added a second one. There was one Spec Ops mission, and first of all, it's very hard. The co-op is extremely hard in this game, and it's kind of bugged half the time. It pretty much involves you having to hold out in this small Middle Eastern town, and you have to fight off a bunch of enemies and wait for a helicopter to come and get you. But a lot of the times, players have reported that they're not able to get in the helicopter, and it's not very clear because the helicopter doesn't land on the ground. You kind of have to jump into it. At least that's how it worked for me. I know some people have tried to jump into it and it didn't work out. So, at launch, you have one special ops mode, which is super disappointing. And then they had this other thing called operations, if I remember correctly, which is these 4 very large scale missions. They're pretty much like strikes in Destiny. That's probably the best way I could compare it to. And you're in this wide open world map. You go to certain objectives, and you just kind of the same thing where you're running through this really big open world map. 3 other players have to fight waves of enemies and just kind of survive and finish whatever objectives they are. I just found it to be extremely boring. I thought, with the fact that it was in an open world map, they weren't able to curate these encounters very well in a way to have good enemy encounters and good game design. It just felt like you're running in these very empty locales and trying to complete these objectives, and there'd be these crazy difficulty spikes where enemies are coming in from all sides and you don't know where they're coming, and they're just spawning out of thin air, and it just becomes extremely overwhelming. So that's those 2 things, operations and classic special ops, they really failed at. And if it wasn't obvious enough, this open world map that they had, which you might think sounds really cool, an open world map for Spec Ops, for the operations mode at least, is very much the battle royale map they're going to add later. It's already been leaked. People had their suspicions when the game came out that this is a very strange thing to include for Spec Ops, and it's pretty much just a repurposed battle royale map. And now that there's been leaks of the actual battle royale that's going to come in spring, it's been confirmed that that map in Spec Ops is the one that we're going to see in Battle Royale. So, a little silly, and I was extremely, extremely disappointed about Spec Ops. Even the survival was super disappointing. It just, come round 5, you have these juggernauts that just absolutely wreck you. There's a huge, once again, difficulty spike. I feel like they didn't curve things well enough in the Spec Ops, where, things are pretty manageable, and then all of a sudden you have 5 juggernauts on you and you're dead by round 6, which is just ridiculous. Now, let's talk about the multiplayer. So, multiplayer-wise, I think this game sets a really good foundation if they want to keep going with Modern Warfare. And honestly, every Call of Duty from here on out should take the gunplay in this game and copy and paste it into whatever the next COD is, supposedly Black Ops 5. Because the gunplay in this game is fantastic. Best gunplay I've ever experienced in any shooter ever, even more than Destiny or whatever. It's fantastic. The just the feeling of the gun when you're shooting it feels great. But the worst thing in this game, there's kind of a but wait thing with this game. There's always a this is good but wait. And for me this time around, and I'm not the only one to say this, very widespread, it's known that the maps in this game are really, really bad. Like, probably the worst COD maps I've ever played on. Specifically the ones that come to mind are Euphrates Bridge. It's awful. It's way too cluttered. I know that the developers said that they wanted to create maps that were more realistic to maybe their real world counterparts, but it creates this point where maybe you have a point in domination where there's just so many areas that you can get shot from and killed, and it doesn't create a fun gameplay loop where there's so many places that you have to account for that can just become overwhelming, and you're just constantly dying and dying. And the meta in this game, my god, it is terrible. You have the 725 shotgun, which they've nerfed a few times already, but at launch it was terrible. But it's still very strong. And so this is what the meta is. It's M4s, 725 shotgun, the snipers that snipe you across the map and camp, and claymores. That is the entire meta of this game. And claymores, I don't know who thought that was a good idea to bring back. I'm pretty sure they got rid of that in Modern Warfare 3. There's absolutely no way you can avoid it. At least I know in some games when there's a bouncing Betty, you can crouch and avoid it. That's all they should have had, because there is a bouncing Betty equivalent in this game. And yeah, I think they messed up by maybe having the M4 as the first or second gun that you get, because everyone is using that gun. But besides that, that's the main game modes. I think gunfight is fantastic. Probably I love gunfight so much I almost would have bought the game for it, but I don't want to drop $60 for one game mode. And if you're curious, I did rent this game. Also, one more thing, the ground war maps, I think that they are very bad. I think they need to go back to the drawing board with how they want to approach map design in general with this game. I think the map design in the ground war maps and the map design in the regular maps is just really bad. And they need to go back to the drawing board with everything in regards to map design for this game. And they've added maps since launch, like Shoot House or Clear House, or I forget what the map is. You know what I'm talking about. That's 3 lanes, and that's widely regarded as the best map in the game. So people say they get bored at 3-lane maps, but this is what happens when you have something that's not 3 lanes. It's just ridiculous. Cluttered, and people are just camping left and right, and it's not very fun. There's a lot of great foundations in this game, but I found myself getting so angry when I played this game. More angry than I have gotten playing World War II or Black Ops 4, and even the more recent ones, which maybe they're standard games, they're not that exciting to play. I wasn't as upset playing them, I would say. And it might sound like I was just totally trashing this game, but there's a lot to like about this game. I think like I said, the story is fantastic. Even though it might hold some punches, it's not as controversial as I thought it was going to be. It was actually pretty plain in terms of there wasn't too much controversy in my opinion. They kept trying to hype that up, saying, oh, every mission is controversial. But yeah, and the gunplay is fantastic. Gunfight is some of the most fun I've had in a multiplayer game in years. But there's always some cons with it. The map design is bad, and Spec Ops is a total dud. So taking that all into consideration, I am going to go ahead and give this game a 7.5 out of 10. I think it's a good game because I think COD has always been good, just off of gameplay mechanics and things like that. Those are all very important, but there's a lot to work on. And I think if they make a Modern Warfare 2 and fix the map design and make sure Spec Ops is good to go at launch, that could be one of the best games in the series. So, yeah, there you go. That's Modern Warfare. Okay, so now we're going to talk about Outer Worlds. Now, I don't have that much to say about this one. I'm going to keep it pretty brief, but it's pretty much, if you've played Fallout New Vegas or Fallout 3, it's pretty much that exact type of game in, like a sci-fi setting. The general story is you are one of thousands of people that gets brought into this new galaxy, I believe it's called Halcyon, where, humanity has started, opening up colonies and colonizing these planets. But you get opened up, you're the only one that gets taken out of cryosleep, and your goal is to try to get everyone else that was in cryosleep with you out of, cryosleep. I'm saying cryosleep a lot. But the main enemy of the game are these corporations that are corporatizing these colonies, and there's a lot of satire, and it's a very funny game, but it's literally just Fallout New Vegas or Fallout 3 in a sci-fi setting, like I was saying earlier. You pick your character, gender, male or female, and there's all sorts of stats that you can specialize in, like, how smart you are, how good you are with technology, your persuasion and things like that. And it creates a lot of freedom with how you can approach this game. When I played the game, I primarily focused on maxing out my speech abilities so I could really get out of any conversation or talk my way out of any conversation. But the combat is okay. It's not a full-on open world game, but it's like hub-based. There's multiple planets, and each one of these planets has small open worlds that you can go between and get quests and help people out. And those are the pros of the game, where there's a lot of freedom with how you can approach conversations and how you can be as a character. You can be a total douche, or you can be a really nice guy trying to help everyone out. So the game is definitely one for multiple playthroughs, I would say. However, going into the cons, I would say that this game is very much those previous games, those previous entries, and it's obvious to make those comparisons because New Vegas was made by Obsidian, and they made this game, but just on a smaller scale. And then I've been seeing this game get a lot of praise, getting 9s and maybe 10s, and it's nominated for Game of the Year at Game Awards. But I can't really praise it too much because it's those experiences distilled down to a smaller scale. The game took me less than 20 hours to beat, and that's mainly because the story feels very wandering. You don't really feel like there's a proper goal. You just kind of feel like you're going around and helping people, and the main story is very short-lived. There's less than 10 quests, but there's a lot of side quests. And like I said, this is definitely a game worth replaying, so you probably want to maybe play it twice. 18. It took me 18 hours. Probably multiply that by 2, and you get, this is going to be a game that you're going to probably have multiple playthroughs with, have upwards of 30 hours of gameplay with. But it doesn't do anything new to me. I feel like it's very standard in terms of this genre of game, and it's nice that a game like this has come around, where we've been missing out. BioWare and Bethesda, they've kind of been messing up with their past few releases, having these story-driven RPGs. But I didn't feel too connected with the story, which is something that I think BioWare does really good with. Whenever they nail it down, their stories and characters are really good. But besides Pravati was my favorite character. Besides her, everyone else was kind of okay. The gameplay is probably equivalent to Fallout 4. You take Fallout 4's gameplay in gun style and put it into here. That's how it's like. The very brief thoughts on this game. I didn't have too much to talk about just because it is so much similar to these older games. And if you've played them, I would just go watch a review on those games. I'm going to give this one an 8 out of 10. Now, I didn't have too much to say about Outer Worlds. But this one is a game that's been discussed and debated about a lot, and that is Death Stranding. Probably the most divisive game of the year. People love it, people hate it, and I'm here to tell you what I think about this game. And I'll say right now, I loved this game. I thought it was fantastic, and I'll go exactly into why. Kojima, he's an auteur, even though he does questionable, choices. He has a really unique vision, and I appreciate that. And this is really a game that this is the type of game I've never played before. And I don't know if I'll ever play a game like this before. Play a game like this ever again. And so let me just break down what the general synopsis of this game is. There's been a apocalyptic event, and it's called the Death Stranding. Pretty much destroyed the infrastructure of the United States and has caused the states to disband, and now it's just very scattered cities, cities scattered throughout the world, throughout the U.S. And your job is to go from one end of the United States to the next and connect these cities so there can be some sort of semblance of a country again. And obviously, there's a lot more complicated things to it. Just off the trailers, a lot of people have been super confused what exactly this game is about. And pretty much this apocalyptic event has created, the barrier between life and death. It's pretty much taken it down. There's these things called BTs, and they are pretty much dead people or things, but they still have a connection to the real world, so they're haunting the world. And you'll find them, and they might, while you're out in the open world, they'll maybe try to kill you. And then the BB, which is a bridge baby, is a baby that you keep on your suit. He's what's able to detect these ghosts pretty much, so he can help you avoid them. And I don't want to go too much into story besides that. And this but speaking of the story in general, it does get a lot more complex, but I honestly thought the story was probably the most detracting part of this game, because it just starts getting so convoluted and so in-depth, and it's like jumping down a rabbit hole whenever someone tries to explain something about what's going on in this game, that you tend to just kind of zone out, where you're like, we spent 15 minutes, this guy's standing here trying to explain to you what these BTs are and the origin of them, and it just gets so ridiculous at times. I also don't think the writing is the best. I think that might also potentially be with the fact that, Kojima, he wrote this game, but he's a Japanese speaker, so I feel like maybe some of the dialogue that he's trying to get across doesn't translate well into an American or English setting. But I would say if you're trying to play this game for the story, you might be really involved, and there's some very emotional moments in the story, and there are some really great payoffs towards the end. But if you're getting this game, you need to be invested with the gameplay that's occurring, because that's what's going to be 80% of the game. There's a lot of story at the start, and there's a lot of story at the end, but in between that, there's a lot of gameplay. And when people saw this game pre-release, there was a lot of walking that Kojima was showing, and people said, "Oh, this can't be the full game." It is the full game. A lot of people have been calling this game a walking simulator, and you could call it that. It really is a walking simulator. But I think in the context of the gaming industry, it's not a walking simulator. And let me explain. Whenever people talk about a walking simulator, they say, they think about games like Gone Home or What Remains of Edith Finch, where in those games, you literally walk around and you go to certain points in the level or the world that you're in, and a story is dumped out onto you, and you keep going. There's no real gameplay in the actual movement of your character. However, in this game, the regards of it being a walking simulator, the actual aspect of you walking around this world and moving around the world is very in depth. You have to be careful about the terrain that you're walking around at all times, because your character can trip around. You have to be careful if you're walking around in rivers and such, because if the river is too deep, you'll fall down and you'll start sliding into the river. And the main point in making sure you're walking on easy terrain is the packages that you're taking. So when you're trying to connect parts of America, you're taking these packages around, maybe trying to convince people to get on this network that's going to connect everyone. And there's a lot of gameplay in the actual aspect of traveling around. People say everything's a fetch quest in this game, but the actual thing that, going and delivering the package, that's where that's where all the gameplay really is. But it's really in depth and it's really enjoyable. At least I thought it was to me, because every situation, every delivery that you're making, it feels like a puzzle that you're being involved in. You might see this path you're supposed to go along, and you realize, okay, there's a river, there's mountainous territory. What will I need to get through this? So you say, okay, I'll bring a ladder, I'll bring a climbing anchor with me to get around. And then you have to actually maneuver around these territories, and it's super fun. It's a more fun version of Breath of the Wild, I think. It's a lot more in depth, and the game's really able to focus all of its assets into this primary form of gameplay, and I thought it was super interesting. Also, whenever there's also these mules besides the BTs, that these enemies that are obsessed with taking packages and getting likes on the packages, because when you deliver the packages, you can get likes. So they'll, you have to avoid them, and then there's, with that, there's a lot of situations where you have to escape from them, and it creates these really tense situations where you have to get through. Maybe you have to say, okay, I can't get through this easy terrain, but I have to get through maybe more tough terrain, like all these rocks are in front of me or this river, and you just have to send it sometimes and keep on running so you can get out of these dangerous territories, and it creates these really fun, cat and mouse games that you're involved in. And the soundtrack too, when that plays during these encounters, is amazing. There's a very synth and electronic soundtrack throughout this game, and I loved it. But a lot of people have issue with this gameplay loop. People thought there was going to be a lot more action, and there's not that much action. If you play this game right, you're going to get through this game without killing anyone, I think. But yeah, I loved this game. And also with the terrain, you can eventually end up building things to help you out, like bridges and zip lines and stuff like that. And it creates these fun situations where you might be going around, maybe outside of a delivery, trying to set up this infrastructure for like roads and zip lines, trying to get you from place to place. So it's so it's a lot easier for yourself. And the cool thing is this game is also online. Where you should be connected online when you're playing it, because these structures that are being built, you can also see other player structures. So at one point in the game, you're in a mountainous territory where really the best way to probably get around is setting up these zip lines. And I saw there was a couple set up by other players, and then I made it kind of my job to finish up this network of zip lines so I could get from one area to the next. And I remember one delivery I did, I pretty much completed the entire delivery without having to walk. I just rode the zip lines, and I thought that was super gratifying. And this game is super beautiful too. This is, people say it's a walking simulator, but it's more of a hiking simulator. And one thing, that people like hiking for, why they like hiking is, they get to really appreciate nature and stuff like that. And I thought that's a game like that, that applies in this game. We're able to enjoy the environment a lot and really appreciate it and really take in nature. There's two maps in the game. The first one is a kind of an intro map, and then the second map you go to is the main map. And the there's a mountain range in this game, as well as a plains area and a waterfall, and it's very diverse. And that whole entire time I was thinking, like, I wonder if I'm going to go up into those mountains. And you end up going into those mountains, and from far away, those things look so scary, being up in that cold environment, and then just finally, slowly going up there, it's not like another map, there's no loading screens, just eventually trekking up there and mountaineering. I thought it was super, super cool, and an experience that I've never played in a game before. And I hope more games, look at this game in terms of its traversal mechanics, and maybe take inspiration, because I thought it was super unique. And as much as the story and writing have shortcomings, and I wasn't as invested as I should be, I thought what the gameplay provided was, one of a kind, and really blew me away and had me really invested. I was playing this game like crazy when it came out. So I really enjoyed this game, and I think this is a Game of the Year contender for me. Might even be my Game of the Year, because it was just such a one of a kind experience, and I thought what they were trying to do with the gameplay mechanics they nailed. People I think that are having issues with this game, they were expecting it to be something else and it wasn't that, so that's why they're having issues with it. I think if you take this game for what it is and what it's trying to be, this game is fantastic, and yeah, I loved it. So I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. Now, finally, the last game that we're going to talk about, which is an unexpected surprise, I thought, an unexpected hit as well, is Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. A bit of a mouthful, kind of a bad name in my opinion, but this game is awesome. This game is really, really good. Now, let me explain why. So, in this realm or this era of EA Star Wars game, we haven't gotten a single good one. We've gotten 2 Battlefront games, and I think that might honestly be it. I think they were the ones that canceled Star Wars 1313 way back in the day. They canceled Amy Hennig's Star Wars game, and I think they canceled Visceral Star Wars game as well. So they haven't been able to churn a good product out with Star Wars, and they've had the license since I believe 2013 or whenever it was. But we're finally here. We have a great Star Wars game, and I gotta say, this was an absolute treat to play. So let me give you the rundown of the story and then how the gameplay works and what I thought of it overall. So with the story, it takes place between episodes 3 and 4, and it involves a Jedi who escaped the Jedi Purge or Order 66. His name's Cal Kestis, and his job is what happens is he's laying undercover. Something happens that causes him to come out of hiding, and he must then go on a galaxy-wide adventure where he has to pretty much try to rebuild the Jedi Order. Now that it has fallen order, get it? But that's the general gist of the story. But I thought it was done really well with the characters. I thought, this cast of characters that are introduced in this game, I liked more than, the sequel trilogy characters. These characters I was invested in with their journey, with what had happened to them in the Jedi Purge. It's Cal Kestis, and the main other person that he's with is named Seer, and then also BD1, which is his little robot sidekick. Those 3 are kind of the main characters, the people who bring the story along, as well as there's the main villain of the story named Second Sister, and her connection and interaction with this band of people. And I think everything is done really well. The story is presented really well. The writing is great. We're really able to tap into, the trauma that these characters had to deal with, with the Jedi Purge or Order 66. And we never really got that, I feel like, in the movies or such. When New Hope and those characters that you follow, almost all of them are people that weren't around during the Jedi Order. So it's nice to see this where we get to see characters react to the tragedies that happened during episode 3. And I thought it was super cool. So right off the bat, interesting story, as well as great characters, I thought, and great writing. And that's something that I feel like the modern era of Star Wars has been severely lacking, and something that we haven't had for a very long time with Star Wars. Going into the gameplay, though, it's really this melting pot of a bunch of different genres, and even though it might not do or emulate to the equal of what it's trying to copy, I think when you put it all together under the Star Wars logo or the Star Wars banner, it turns into this really fine package. So let me break it down. There's traversal and platforming, which is akin to Uncharted. Then there's, just the actual traversal of the world, trying to figure out where to go. That's kind of like Metroidvania and Dark Souls. And then the combat is also like Sekiro or Dark Souls. So in terms of the actual platforming, just literally take Uncharted, like Nathan Drake, and put him in this game. There's a few extra Jedi abilities that you have, such as, wall running and things like that Nathan Drake wouldn't be able to do. But yeah, and then in terms of the Metroidvania style, you'll get abilities throughout the game like Jedi pull and push and weapons and stuff that will allow you to traverse areas that you weren't able to go through before. And like I said, this was a galaxy-spanning adventure. So there's multiple planets that you can go to and leave and come back, and you'll go back to places before and be able to go to places you weren't able to see before on that planet because you have new abilities. And I've always been a sucker for stuff like that. I always thought that was always super fun, and that's where the Dark Souls element of the traversal also comes into the world navigation, where these areas that you might not have been able to see before, they end up looping back around to places that you had visited, where it's got that interconnecting world design of a Dark Souls, but it's got that Metroidvania twist where maybe some of those places are gated off based off your abilities, and then you mix that in with the parkour of Uncharted, and you get a really interesting blend right there, I think. And then there's the Sekiro combat, Sekiro / Dark Souls style combat that's super fun. It adds a nice challenge. This game was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. I played on the second highest difficulty, where all the damage incoming, parry timing, it was all equaled out, and I got my ass kicked a good amount of times. I try to imagine Star Wars is something that's universally appealed to. Kids are definitely gonna have to play this at a lower difficulty, but I think that's nice. Star Wars has appealed to so many people, and I think that translates well to the difficulty settings in this game, where you can play it at the low setting and get just the story, and the combat isn't that big of a deal. But if you're playing at the higher settings, the combat can be definitely a challenge. I think the issues though that come up and why this game, suffers little, is that I was saying earlier, the things that it's trying to emulate, it doesn't reach the same heights as those things, where the world traversal is weakened because sometimes jumps just don't, the actual jumping around and moving around sometimes doesn't work as well as you'd want it to. Sometimes there's jumps that you think that you would make and it doesn't, because maybe there's, the registration in terms of your character landing on a flat surface just doesn't work out. And then there's the combat, which, in Sekiro, the whole thing was you're trying to be aggressive and you're trying to bring down their poise meter, and when that poise meter is down, you're able to do a critical blow on them. That's the same idea in this game, but the problem is their poise meter comes back after you land a couple hits, so it kind of breaks the flow sometimes with the combat. But I think what they've set, the foundation they've set, and if they carry on, I think the series could be even more fantastic. So, and I gotta say, the way the story plays out is, especially the ending and the payoff for some of the characters, is really great. My one issue with the story, though, going back to the story, is based on restrictions of the lore that's already been set. There's story elements that are already going to go a certain way, because this is technically a prequel to episode 4, where some things that might get brought up or things that might happen that eventually aren't going to end up happening, or will happen or won't happen, because we've seen the movies and we know how things are going to play out in the end. So I'm hoping wherever they go with this sequel, because I think there can be a sequel, they should really try to focus on a story that is outside of the realms of that's so in the DNA of the story isn't so interconnected to the movies. But overall, I really, really enjoyed this game. I think if it wasn't for some of the bugginess with the gameplay and the weird combat flow sometimes, this game could be in the 9 range, but I think it falls just short of that. So I'm gonna give it an 8.8. And that is gonna be it for this episode. These are all the games I've been playing for the past month and a half. I played and beat. Pretty good batch for the most part. I mean, the worst one was Modern Warfare, with that being a 7.5, and we had a 9.0 game in there with that Stranding. So there you go, guys. The next episode will be primarily focused on the movies and TV shows and music, stuff like that. The other stuff that I focused on or I got to experience over this span of time. And yeah, till next time, take care, guys.